Having a great start to the week, and I hope you are having a great, fantastic start to the month of June. It is June, summertime is officially here, and I hope y'all are having a great one so far. If you guys are today in history, this is I guess technically it's a sports buff trivia question, whatever. Today in history, June 9th, big day in the world of horse racing. Secretariat actually won the Triple Crown in record-breaking fashion on this day. And if you have not seen the movie, man, you should go watch the movie. It is such a great, powerful, emotional movie. I like to, when I watch movies, I don't just watch them for like passive entertainment. I like to use those times as a time to like disengage from what's going on in the world right now, because man, the world's got, we read it, the world's got enough problems for, today, so why worry about the things of tomorrow, right? Like, the world has got enough problems, and so I like to disengage to give myself a chance to emotionally just rest from those things and then engage in the movie, right? And so I like watching movies, and man, I get into them. I will get into it. Doesn't matter if it's like, the little Einsteins, right? I'm over there with my kids and I'm patting so the rocket can take off, but then you watch a movie like Secretariat, and man, it is so good. It draws you in, and man, it's just incredible. The emotion that they can capture in a movie where the main character, essentially is an animal, is a horse. And ESPN did a top 50 athletes of the decade, and Secretariat was the only animal that was on that list because of just how absolutely incredible this horse was, and the way that that this horse won the Triple Crown. It was incredible. So yeah, anyway, you should go check out Secretariat if you haven't watched it. It is really good. So today I'm going to share from Psalm 142. And if you know your Psalms, if you're like a psalmologist, it's not a real word. If you know your Psalms, Psalm 142 is a psalm of lament. A psalm of grieving, of pouring out of strong negative emotion. And so this is like probably a terrible choice, typically on the surface, for a lunchtime devotional where hopefully you guys are encouraged and, kind of spurred on to greater things, and living in a way as Christians, as followers of Jesus, that's going to bring not just hope to you, but light into this world. And therefore hope into this world, and therefore advancing the kingdom of God. And so I chose Psalm 142 because why not? Because here's the thing is, I want you to hold on to the very end, because I think that even this psalm of lament is incredibly encouraging, and you won't understand it till you get to the end. But here we go. It says it's a maskil of David when he was in the cave, a prayer. And so that phrase right there, in the cave, it says it was written by David. It was a literary or a musical style, and it was written in the cave. And so this is a reference back to 1 Samuel 22, when David is hiding, right? David has been driven from Israel. Saul is trying to kill him. Saul hates and despises David for unjust reasons. And so David flees, and he goes to the country of the enemy. And when he gets there, he has to pretend like he is insane, like psychotic, like clinically insane, right? So that they don't kill him. And he goes and he hides in the caves. And David is in this cave. And if you look, throughout the Old Testament, caves are referenced and for different reasons. But throughout the Psalms, they're referenced in a way that is generally a acknowledgement of isolation or loneliness. And so in all of that, we see that this is written from a place where David feels alone. He feels like he has got no one with him. And so he writes and he says, I cry aloud with my voice to the Lord. I make supplication with my voice to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare my trouble before him. When my spirit was overwhelmed within me, you knew my path. In the way where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. Look to the right and see, for there is no one who regards me. There is no escape for me. No one cares for my soul. Now, if we stop the psalm there, that's the first 4 verses, man, it would be completely understandable for what David was going through. It would be really depressing. This would be the worst lunchtime devotional ever. But thankfully, we don't stop there. But before we go on and before I read the next couple verses of this psalm, I just want to camp out on this for a second and really understand where David was, right? We see him almost have an indictment against God and how God has, what he feels like, completely abandoned him in the first part of his psalm, right? And it was what you would assume. David's in a cave. He is on the run for his life. He is hiding in the territory of the enemy. He has got no one. And he pours out to God his complaint. He declares his trouble before God. When his spirit was overwhelmed, he feels like God knew his path and could see clearly that there was a trap that was set for him, but let him walk it anyway. And even goes so far to say that there is no escape for him and no one cares for his soul. And I think that in this time, in the world that we live in, and you know, it may be your kind of experience with the global situations that are going on, because it's everything from weather to sociological stuff to everything in between, right? There are so many different things, health issues, like so many concerns that are going on right now, and it can feel like for us that we are in a place where we've just been forgotten about, isolated, where we are absolutely alone, where no one cares for our soul. But what we see is that David continues, and in the midst of it, it's so great because and don't miss this is, David pours out his soul to God and is just absolutely raw and honest and as authentic as he can possibly be. He doesn't hold anything back. He lays it all out there, and that's okay. That's good. And so if you're ever in a place where you feel like, man, I can't even pray because all I have to say are just negative things. All I have are complaints, right? We see that David goes through that same thing and he lays it out for us to see. But then he continues and he says in verse 5, he says, I cried out to you, Lord. I said, you are my refuge. You are my portion in the land of the living. Give heed to my cry, for I am brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, because they are too strong for me. Bring my soul out of prison, so that I may give thanks to your name. The righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. And there's a reality that we have to understand in here in this psalm and this lament, this pouring out of grieving of David, is that God sometimes brings us into a place where we're surrounded and we're in community, and sometimes he brings us to a place where we are in the cave, where we are in this, as David says, this prison, where we are just absolutely alone in what we're dealing with, where we are, as what we feel. We are alone. And because there are times where God causes us to thrive and we are blessed in community. And we know that it's easy to see those times. But then the other side of the coin, the other reality is that there are times where we thrive and are blessed in our aloneness. When we are blessed and thrive in our aloneness because God deals with us differently. There are things that God does in your life and in my life when we are in the cave, when we feel like we are alone. and we go to God, and it's Him and it's us. And there are some incredible, powerful, significant things that God does in our life in those times. And what we see is that, whether we're in the community or in the cave, whether we are overwhelmed with sorrow or we're overwhelmed with joy, in all of the ups and downs of life, the one consistency is Jesus Christ and His interaction in our life. The one consistency that we have is Jesus, is the love that God has shown us. And we see that because, David continues, and in the middle of this deep grief and feeling of isolation and being alone, and where he says, look, he's begging God, give heed to my cry. I've been brought very low. Deliver me from my persecutors, for they're too strong for me. David hits the chord that you see throughout Psalms and other places, and the reality which is that when we are weak and when we are not strong enough, then He is our strength. Not that He is strong enough to provide for us, which He does, but He is our very source of strength. And we see that David confesses this, he pours this out to God, and it goes on to say that, that God is going to deliver him from this prison, that he will return and give thanks. And it's so cool because God takes us from these prisons, these places, the caves, the place where we're in isolation, where we have those maybe the bars or the chains that are keeping us in a place where we feel like we're captive. And God sets us free from that and brings us to a place where when we are set free, we come back and we give God thanks because we know that He has given us good things, because God is the source. God gives all good things come from God. We know that God fills us with all blessing. He fills us with all joy, with all peace, that He is the source of those things, and He fills us with those things when He's finished the work that He's doing in us when we're in the cave and we feel alone, and He sets us free. He brings our soul, He delivers us out of the cave, out of that prison, and we come back and we give Him thanks. And when we give Him thanks, it's incredible, because what we see is that in the last verse He says, the righteous will surround me, for you will deal bountifully with me. And it is so amazing because God takes us from the cave, that place of isolation, and He re-surrounds us in our community. He re-surrounds us with the community of those who have also been blessed in the same exact way, and we share in that. Because God has dealt bountifully with me. He is the God from whom all blessings flow. And He is the God who gives us all good things. And it's so amazing because what we see is in the Old Testament, God doesn't leave David in the cave. He remembers David. And in the Old Testament, when God remembers, it's so cool. And I was just going to share this real quick. When God remembers us, right? When He remembered the Israelites who were in slavery, it's not that God had forgotten about the Israelites, that He was like, oh yeah, that's right, I had a chosen people. I wonder what happened to them. That's not the kind of remember that the Old Testament conveys, that the Hebrew conveys. This remembering is an action. It's not just a passive, like, popped into my mind. Remember in the Old Testament, in the Hebrew, actually means that there is an action that is taken. And so when God remembers the people that are in slavery, the Hebrews, it is an action that God takes to say, I not only do I remember, but I am going to go and do something about this situation. And we see in David's life that God doesn't leave him in the cave, but God remembers him and comes and delivers him from that. And He does the same thing for me, and He does the same thing for you. So wherever you are, whatever struggle you're having in this time right now, wherever you feel, maybe you feel like you are where David was and you want to write a lament, go write a lament. That's great. Write a psalm of lament to God. But remember to come back and give Him thanks and know that He remembers you. He remembers you. That God is not going to leave you where you are. He didn't leave Joseph in the pit. He didn't leave Joseph in prison. He delivered him and then used Joseph to be this literally the physical savior of the known world at that time, of Egypt and the surrounding areas, when he provided in the time of famine, because God put Joseph in a place where it did a work in Joseph that was so deep and significant when he felt like he was alone. But Joseph never gave up hope, and he never lost faith, and he came back and he gave God thanks over and over and over, and God gave him every possible blessing. It's the same thing for me, and it's the same thing for you. God has not forgotten you. God does remember and will remember, and God is working on you right now, and God is the source of all good things, and He is the source of every bountiful blessing, because in all truth and all reality, God has given us Christians, followers of Jesus, nothing but goodness. So I hope you guys have a great Tuesday. Lean into that goodness. Lean into God. Let Him do a work in you, and then share that goodness with others. Be the source of joy in other people's lives that God is in your life. Hope y'all have a great Thursday. Keep your hands clean, stay healthy, stay safe,